History rarely remembers the men who forced empires to keep their word. One of those men was Thomas Peters, a formerly enslaved African who would become one of the most powerful, defiant, and overlooked founding figures of Sierra Leone. His story begins not with a crown or a flag, but with a chain. Thomas Peters was born around 1738 in what is now Nigeria, most likely among the Yoruba people. As a young man, he was captured by slave traders and sold into bondage in the American colonies. His owner, a man named William Campbell, forced him into labor in North Carolina. But Peters was never meant to be silent. He attempted escape multiple times, each failure met with brutal punishment. Yet he never stopped resisting. When the American Revolutionary War erupted in 1775, Peters recognized something few enslaved Africans dared to believe: war creates opportunity. The British Crown, desperate for manpower, promised freedom to enslaved Africans who fled rebel masters and joined British forces. Peters seized that promise and ran. Thomas Peters enlisted with the Black Pioneers, a British military unit composed of formerly enslaved Africans. He fought, worked, and served the empire, not as a victim but as a man who believed contracts should be honored. When the British lost the war, they faced an uncomfortable problem: thousands of free black loyalists who could not safely remain in the newly formed United States. So the British made another promise. They would relocate them to Nova Scotia in Canada, where land and equality were supposedly waiting. Again, Peters believed. Reality in Nova Scotia was harsh and humiliating. Black loyalists were given infertile land, delayed supplies, and forced into poverty. White loyalists received the best plots. Racism followed them across the Atlantic. Thomas Peters emerged once more as a leader, organizing petitions, confronting officials, and demanding justice. When colonial authorities ignored them, Peters did something unprecedented for a black man in the 18th century. He crossed the Atlantic alone to confront the British government. In 1790, Thomas Peters arrived in London, poor but unafraid. He spoke directly to abolitionists and officials, including members of the Sierra Leone Company. He laid out the betrayal of black loyalists in chilling detail. His testimony shocked British reformers. What followed was revolutionary. The British agreed to resettle black loyalists, not as beggars but as free settlers in West Africa. The proposed destination, Sierra Leone, envisioned as a new home for free Africans and formerly enslaved people. Thomas Peters had done the unthinkable. He forced an empire to correct itself. In 1792, nearly 1,200 black loyalists sailed from Nova Scotia to West Africa. They established Freetown, the foundation of modern Sierra Leone. Though Peters did not live to see the nation flourish, his role was pivotal. He was not merely a settler, he was a catalyst. Without his defiance, petitions, and courage, the resettlement may never have happened. Sierra Leone was not founded by kings or conquerors alone, but by a man who refused to accept broken promises. Thomas Peters represents something radical even today. A formerly enslaved African who challenged global powers. A man who believed freedom was not charity, but a right. A founding figure whose influence crossed 3 continents. Yet his name is often missing from history books. Not because his story is small, but because it is dangerous. It proves that oppressed people have always known how to organize, resist, and reshape the world. Thomas Peters died in 1792, shortly after the founding of Freetown, poor, exhausted, and largely uncelebrated. But here is the question history still avoids. If one formerly enslaved man could force the British Empire to create a nation, how many other revolutions were buried before they ever reached the page? And whose freedom is still waiting on a promise yet to be kept? Want more stories like this? Hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our story, because this is just getting started.